But yeah, let's change geography.
Okay.
Let's go over to Bach.
Yeah. Right.
So you are the architect in residence. So tell us what, and the first ever one as well. So you go down in the history books. It will be in your Wikipedia entry. So tell us, what does that role involve, and how did it come about?
How did it come about? Well, it's very interesting. So I started a year ago, and it's something they've been thinking about, trying to make happen for a year or so before that. It was something which the Liberal Democrats put into their party manifesto, that they would appoint an architect in residence. And people have since said to me, why on earth do they think that would help them get elected? Which is a very interesting question. Anyway, they did do it. They put it in their manifesto. So, and then together with the university, they found funding. In fact, so I'm a professor at the university. So that's where my appointment comes through. And there was an endowment, which they managed to get to fund it's a 2-day-a-week job. So in a way, you might say it's a small role, although on the other hand, 2 days a week is quite a lot of time, really. So it certainly, preoccupies me a great deal. The idea came from the councillors. And I think in a way, it's probably fair to say I'm working to the members and I'm working to the leaders. So I'm sort of advising them and looking at things from their behalf. But of course, all the time I'm working with the council officers in their planning teams or their regeneration team or whatever, or their highways team. So I'm sort of talking to lots of people across the council. In a way, it's a very, one very nice thing about it is I have no responsibility, really, if you like. So, I'm not running anybody else. I'm free to go anywhere. I can talk to anybody within the council that I want to, really, and people have been very sort of receptive to that. And I suppose, one's particularly in that respect, I suppose, they're often looking for opportunities where you might end up kind of blurring some of the boundaries between different aspects of what the council does. Well, originally it was an 18-month appointment. I hope we might extend it. I think in the long term, when they appoint somebody else to take over, which I hope they'll do at some point, you probably have to be looking at a term of something like 3 years to make these things work. And when you look at, it's quite a common thing elsewhere in Europe, of course. I'm called the architect in residence, and that term is one which I've gone along with because it was in their manifesto. In Europe, they tend to call these roles the city architect.
City architect, yeah.
But they are in Belgium and the Netherlands, in Czechoslovakia, into the Czech Republic. The appointment is a bit like this. You appoint somebody or maybe from private practice. They come in for a period of time, years. In the Czech Republic, they actually appoint practices. So a practice takes on this role. And it would be very nice if in this country others were to take up the idea, I think, and work in this way. And, I think you bring something different. Obviously, there are lots of architects. There are architects working within the council, within the planning department. But in a way, the experience that I think I bring a kind of different level of experience in a way from all our projects that we do, and maybe an architect's point of view. So maybe I'm sort of sometimes changing the focus. I don't want to exaggerate what I contribute. That's a very good local authority. They've been doing some remarkable things themselves already. But I think in a way sometimes, and maybe it's almost a matter of kind of highlighting something. Sometimes things get kind of forgotten about, and you can kind of focus attention again on different things.
And so, what does this role offer that your conventional consultancy cannot?
Well, Bath would use consultants to carry out discrete pieces of work. So, it would ask them to do a study on a certain area of the city, as it were, as part of which might become a planning document in the fullness of time. I'm not producing those sorts of documents. I'm more of a participant in all the kind of multitude of discussions that are going on. As I say, maybe simply focusing attention on different ways. So it is quite a kind of personal involvement. And I probably spend the first year essentially just going and meeting as many people as I could, both inside the council and, of course, outside the council. So, I'm trying to get the best possible understanding I can of the place. And of course, it's not Bath, it is the city of Bath, which is extraordinary, but it's also northeast Somerset. So it's a wider area as well. It's a wider district that the role includes.
Yeah. So I went over to Bath last weekend for the Jane Austen festival. It was amazing. I mean, I'd been to Bath earlier this year for a spa weekend as a Jew, and I literally planted myself in the Gainsborough. They had a fantastic midweek deal, just, spoiler alert. And then there's the Thermia Spa, which is next door. So between them, I really revived myself. But it was amazing that the Thermia Spa is like, that you can actually enjoy waters that they say the Romans did.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a city that's so many layers of history. And I don't know if you know, but the main draw of the Jane Austen Festival is this Regency parade. So people wear the Regency costumes. And I understand that this year they had 2,000 people participate in this festival. And the city was just alive, people walking down the parade in their Regency finery, the bands, the music, and then obviously the program it's a 10-day program. And depending on what your interest lies, and you can go for a talk, you can go play games, and the balls, they're sold out. I tried to buy a ticket, no chance. It's a hugely popular draw card. And we know that Bath is one of the most visited cities, probably after London. So in the context of this history, and maybe some people may say it's finished and what more needs to be done. Then what are the biggest opportunities and challenges that you see as the city architect of Bath?
Of course, it's an extraordinary city, and the Jane Austen is a kind of another layer on top of. Yeah. But I mean, really, that the phenomenon of its development in the 18th century is really remarkable, and the architecture is extraordinary. Oh, yeah. Really amazing. So, and it's a World Heritage Site. So, looking after that is, of course, absolutely a key priority. You use the word stewardship. I mean, this is absolutely a place where you have to be a steward of this thing you've inherited, and you have to kind of make sure you're going to pass it on in a good way in the future. But there are issues for the city. So, I mean, one that we've been talking about is the fact that in the centre of the city, there are a lot of buildings which are under occupied. I mean, the ground floors are used for shops, but a lot of the upper parts of the buildings aren't in use. They're not in use because actually it's quite difficult to put them into use for all sorts of reasons, like, fire escape and loss of ground floor entrances and dealing with the historic fabric and improving its environmental performance. There are lots of things that are difficult to do. But we are talking about the moment. I'm certainly been trying to kind of push it up the agenda, is the question of how can we, well, I feel unless you can get all the historic buildings into productive use, the odds of being able to look after them properly are less. I think that the money won't be spent. So that's one thing I think is very important. Then there are whole questions of the climate emergency. I mean, that affects the fabric of the building. But how does this historic, both the buildings and the public realm, how does that respond to the climate emergency? Should we be trying to find ways of increasing more shade in the centre of the city? Should we be planting more trees? All of these changes are contentious. So all I feel I should be doing is just making sure the debate is happening. And I suppose I am maybe in terms of framing it for myself, really, I suppose I'm kind of intrigued by the fact that nature as a kind of driver of the city has been so important. I mean, obviously with the baths themselves, the Roman baths and the springs, and then in the 18th century with the use of the local stone and the architectural responses to the natural topography, and then in the 19th century with all these parks that were constructed. So the whole character of the city has such a close connection to nature that I suppose for me it is interesting now to think about how we deal with nature in the 21st century. Yeah, and probably now in and I mean, for some people that means, well-being and things like that. For me, it's more, I'm kind of more interested in a kind of the sort of science of nature, how we can, how the city might, make a kind of very sort of thoughtful response to the challenge of the climate emergency, but through the way it works with nature to achieve it.
That's so fascinating. I think now, just listening to what you're saying, I think Bath really has a really interesting role to play because we are now living at this point of time in the 21st century where people are so aware of health and well-being, and they're so conscious about what they eat, what they consume. Sauna culture, social sauna culture is making waves now in the UK. So I feel like local businesses or Bath as a city can really reposition themselves as this destination of health wellness that goes back to the Roman times. And as you
well, there are a lot of people in the city who are really, have already, have exactly identified that, this phenomenon. I mean, it was what it was doing in the 18th century or in the 3rd century, whatever it was.
Yeah.
It ought to still be doing that now, really. Yeah. And I mean, and to an extent it is, but, maybe it could do.
Bring social sauna
much more.
All right, let's come back to London and your Stirling Prize nomination. Congratulations. So the London College of Fashion building at the East Bank Cultural Quarter in Stratford has been shortlisted for the 2025 Stirling Prize. So what does this nomination mean to you?
Well, it's obviously, it's wonderful always to get onto the Stirling shortlist. So, of course, we were very excited to hear that piece of news. And I suppose I'm particularly pleased because it's the building that's been built within the Olympic Park, which obviously we've been working on for, over 20 years. So it's great that it's part of that story. And I think it's a very important building, certainly from my life in the practice, because when you go, I mean, it's interesting, when you go there, it has a role to play externally. It creates a kind of new landscape on this western edge of the park, which is a very public landscape. It makes a very conscious attempt to engage with the park. It has this kind of huge portico at its base, which is a kind of deliberate device which is scaled to relate to the scale of the space of the park. And I suppose it's also trying to say something about the nature of what a college of fashion is. But in a sense, when you go into the building, that question is even clearer. One thing we realized as we started to, when we won the competition and then were able to start looking at the buildings that the college was occupying and understanding how the college had grown out of multiple institutions over decades and was still spread over a whole series of different buildings, you realize that two things really. One was that this moment when a college comes together onto one site is a really important moment for them because of the way in an ideal world, it would open up the visibility of everything they do, to the wider community, but particularly to all of their students. And so one of the real challenges, and I think I hope it's worked within the building, is that when you're within the building, you have the opportunity absolutely to understand all these different things that are going on inside the building. And that has been achieved by creating spaces inside the heart of the building, which are used in multiple different ways and which you can walk all the way through. So it's a 16-story building, remarkably, but you can walk your way through the middle of the building from top to bottom in open spaces. And from these spaces in the interior, you can see through into all the teaching spaces. All the spaces have glazed walls so that it's incredibly transparent and understandable. And also because you can see through into these spaces, you also can see through them and you can see to the outside. So it's a very open interior. And the other aspect of it is that when we began working on it, in fact, the Vice Chancellor of the university, very anxious really, that he was very worried that we might just simply design for him an office building or a higher education building, just a kind of standard building, and that's all he would get. And that, that really wasn't enough. He wanted a building and they all wanted a building that would absolutely kind of capture the sense of what the College of Fashion really was. And I think one thing that, we slowly learned really was that the root of the word fashion is facere in Latin. So it's to make, it's not about, it is partly about display and glamour and, the catwalk and all those things. It is about all of that. Of course it is. and movement. And so, you know, some of the ways you move through the building are very important to us. But actually, when you go there, you realize that what everybody's doing is making things. You know, they're cutting patterns, they're cutting cloth, they're knitting, they're cutting hair, they're making casts, they're making jewelry. You know, this is absolutely about making. And so the atmosphere of the building is much more that of a kind of a giant sort of workshop, really, or like a kind of 19th century mill building or something. So it's almost like a kind of industrial building. It has a completely different character than you expect. And I think, therefore, for us as architects, it is when you go there, it is the excitement of the way the building is being used. And perhaps more than any building that we've built, I think, that is what is so sort of dramatic when you're there. It is really fascinating seeing it in use.
Can I ask, is it open to the public? Like, could I walk in and have a look? Or?
Well, absolutely. In fact, deliberately, the lower 4 floors of the building are entirely open to the public. So you can go in from the river level, you can go in from the podium level or the bridge level, if you like, and you can walk up another floor inside the building. So you can't see all the different types of space, but you can see the lower spaces, which is where there are these rather extraordinary elliptical stairs that are, you know, deliberately designed. I mean, because it's a very tall building, we're trying to encourage people to walk as much as we can. So these staircases are, you know, really intended to draw you up and into the building, and the public absolutely can go in there. There's a very nice cafe there, which you can also get a cup of coffee from. So absolutely go next time.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that your client would be worried that they would just get a bulk standard building. So what's their view now?
I think they're very delighted with the outcome. Yeah.
And you know, moving away from the tie, what do you hope the students and the staff feel when they're in this phase?
Well, certainly the feedback we got from the beginning was, I think for the students, it is a very exciting building to use. And I mean, I'm sure they feel very lucky to be there. It is an unusual place in which to learn. And I'm sure the staff, well, I mean, I hope the staff love it. I'm sure they like it, like all teachers. They'll always be weighing up what works and what doesn't work, what they like and what they don't like. So I'm sure there'll be lots of things, you know, still they will say. But I hope in terms of the community of the college, as it were, I think it's giving everybody what they want.
Well, you know, like another responsibility, you're nurturing the next generation of global fashion talent. Like everybody wants to come to London to study fashion. Wow. So many feathers in your cap. So we're coming to the end of our conversation, but I'm going to try and wrap up on everything we've touched on. So let's talk about the future. You've obviously had a lot of experience getting your hands dirty and delivering these projects over a long time. But when you look at cities today, and what do you think we're getting right, and what's still missing? Or maybe I can ask you another question. What should cities be prioritizing in the future? I
would probably say public transport is number one.
Well, I get this.
So,
and I agree with you 100%.
I think, London, we are so lucky in London to have this extraordinary transport network. I mean, it is just remarkable. And, of course, other cities are catching up and doing it. But there are lots of cities you go to around the world where you realize that's the complete absence. And also the moment you stray out of London, I mean, in fact, when you go to Bath, you realize that people don't have anything like that quality of public transport. And of course, if you don't have that quality of public transport, then you have to have a car. You don't have to have one car per household. You have to have 2 or 3 cars per household. And of course, if you have 3 cars per household, then the sort of physical environment you can make is not as nice either, I don't think. So I think public transport is absolutely the starting point for all cities. In a way, that's where the investment should go. I mean, I think I sort of come back to my question of the issue of enclosure. Really, you know, I think that sometimes investment goes into cities which is around individual buildings. Sometimes, you know, where the assumption is that you can kind of add one ingredient in and somehow that will make it better. But unless those new buildings are contributing to the making of the public spaces, then I don't think you're making better cities. You're getting better, you might be getting an opera house or a gallery or something. You're getting kind of amenity. But the challenge is to how you integrate those into places, into making places. And I think it's that integration of those elements that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And also thinking about the future, and currently, how do you see AI and the emerging technologies as tools to help us shape better places?
I think it's inevitable that it will change the way we all work. I think it's absolutely bound to do that. And I suppose the truth is, I'm not sure, I don't know myself, how that will play out. I suppose I'm intrigued by one phenomenon, I suppose you could say. I mean, which is that when the computer, and in a sense this has been with us for many years, but it will, go further with AI. When the more that AI produces the solution, the physical solutions, as it were, the configurations of space and building, and in the end one is making judgments about, this or that somehow through these multiple options which might be generated or whatever. And I'm talking as somebody who knows in second, I know nothing about it. Certainly for people like me and Graham Morrison and, other colleagues in the practice, the way our master plans have evolved is through us drawing things with our hands, and learning about places with our hand through drawing and giving values to different things through understanding, through drawing. And it's what we do, So, what would be interesting is how people, not so much, it's how you feed the information into your brain in order to make the judgments, which interests me. Now, maybe we've already kind of gone through all that, and there's a younger generation who are already mastered that. But for me, that's the big, in our sort of lifetimes, that's the biggest shift from the hand as a way of informing the brain.
Yeah.
And that disappearing.
And I did see on one of your recent LinkedIn posts that you have this tool that you're using. Have you used it personally?
I haven't, no.
I didn't mean to catch you out there. I thought this is really cool. I mean,
right. Well, no, there are a lot of people who are very interested in pursuing things and developing.
Yeah. And that's the reason why I asked, because I thought, really,
you're quite right.
Really cool. So speaking of next generation, what advice would you give to the next generation of urbanists who are, as you've already alluded to, inheriting a climate crisis, a housing crisis, and a planning system that is, allergic to speed?
The planning process is difficult, but I don't see any radical changes taking place there. So I think it will continue. I mean, as urbanists, you're necessarily part of a conversation, aren't you? Nobody's interested in somebody doing having talked about drawings. Nobody's interested in the kind of, concept sketch being the answer to the master plan. Nobody's interested in the big idea at the beginning, the kind of, well, I'm not anyway, the kind of competition winning image which somehow takes you forward. The interesting thing, if you're involved in urban design, is the conversation between all the different parties who either, are involved or should be involved. And in a way, listening is as important as making propositions. I was reminded yesterday by Peter Bishop that when Argent were selected to be the development partner at King's Cross, they were shortlisted down to 3, and the other 2 big property developers went in with models and drawings and designs that they'd already commissioned their architects to produce. Argent, which was then a very small company, maybe a dozen people or something.
No.
Yeah, absolutely. Tiny. They went in and they opened up I may be elaborating this story, but they opened up a drawing and put it on the table, and it was a white piece of paper with nothing on it. And they said, we think, this is the place you have to begin, with a blank sheet of paper, because none of us know the answer now, but if we all work together, we will know the answer in 3 or 4 years' time.
Oh, that's a really good story.
So, I think it is that And I think that's right. I think that is the way these cities, will evolve at their best.
So what's next for Allies and Morrison? What can we expect to see from the practice?
Well, we're in a process of change. So Graham and I are, handing over the reins to other partners at the moment. So as that happens, the practice is beginning to change. And I suppose the main phenomenon is that it is becoming more international, really. We're based here in London. We do have offices in Cambridge and Manchester in England, and we also have an office in Dublin. But now we have an office in Toronto.
Yes, I love that. Yeah.
And an office in Jeddah as well, interestingly. So that has been a kind of change of thinking. And I think it makes sense. I think in a way at this time in the life of the practice, one of the things we have is experience, and that is a thing to take to other countries and build projects. Exactly. And that means that there is a reason to employ us in different parts of the world. Whereas when we began the practice, we were just, we did do some work abroad, but we never felt, well, it's obvious why we should do this here or that there. It didn't feel like that. But now, particularly in these larger urban projects, complex projects, which are sometimes at the kind of master planning scale, sometimes at the kind of metropolitan scale, I suppose, then that seems to be an area where we've developed a kind of expertise, well, not an expertise, but also an approach, I suppose, which does seem to be different not something that people are familiar with in other parts of the world, and therefore of interest. So, we'll see where that leads the practice, but that seems to be a direction.
So this is just a personal question, but do you think you do some work in India?
Well, we have done some work in India.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've done work in Bangalore.
Oh, okay.
And we would love to do more work in India.
Yeah.
We did an important project for I'm not going to remember the name of it, but we did a university competition. We didn't win it. We do find it very interesting to work in different situations in different parts of the world. India would be a lovely place to work. And again, and I suppose, we're probably, again, most interested in this. We are interested in context. At the end of the day, we are interested in context. We are interested in how the work changes and takes us to different places in response to where we're working. And the sort of specificity of that is something that's important to us.
Amazing. And finally, what's next for you personally?
Well, I'm carrying on doing sort of, working the practice a little bit, carrying on with my work in Bath. That will carry on for, if we can extend it, and Mike will probably carry on for a couple of years. At the moment, I don't have any brain power to think beyond that. I'm pretty preoccupied just sort of seeing that through.
Yeah. Oh, I can't imagine watching King's Cross and Moonby Park and now Canada Water and my neck of the woods.
Oh, right.
What?
Yeah,
it's just, it's amazing. Your legacy is phenomenal. And I say it's genuine as an Earth City lover, as an urbanist. And I feel like your impact and your legacy will be enjoyed by Londoners and the work that you're going to do internationally abroad. I'll be watching with keen eyes. So this means that the formal part of our conversation has come to an end. And now we're moving into the final segment, which is called Know Your Neighborhood.
Right.
And your neighborhood is Bankside.
Yeah.
We're here in Bankside right now. And the way it goes is I will share 3 facts about Bankside. And all you have to do is tell me whether you think they're true or false. And maybe a little reasoning behind your answer. I will caveat that the research is based on the internet. The facts have not been verified and cross-checked.
Right.
But whatever is on my note is the final answer.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's do this. All right. So fact number 1, the reconstruction of Shakespeare's Globe was completed in the 1960s as part of post-war rebuilding of London.
Wrong.
Why do you say no?
Well, I don't think it was I don't think it happened in the 60s. It happened much later than that.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
It was nothing to do with the reconstruction of London.
Yeah, no, that's a trick question. True. The Globe only reopened in 1997 thanks to decades of campaigning by American actor Sam Wanamaker, and it brought Elizabethan theatre back to life.
And let me tell you another sort of fascinating fact.
Yeah.
You say it was years of campaigning, but not only campaigning to raise the money,
Yeah.
campaigning to get planning approval.
Ah,
Because it was actually,
Yeah.
the council, Southwark resisted it. They refused it. They wanted to refuse it planning. And they did so because it was loss of employment space. So at that point, when that happened, this was, one of those moments where we were just moving away from this idea of zoning as being kind of fundamental to planning to the kind of idea that somehow this slightly more kind of opportunistic, ad hoc way of seeing the city evolve could begin to happen. So it was a very important project, that, in terms of a change in thinking.
but also, it's arguably one of the most visited sites in London. Every time I'm local, every time I walk past, there are hordes of tourists. There are multiple tours happening. It's so fascinating. So I'm glad that they won that battle.
And you may also, you may or may not know, also one reason why I can answer so confidently is because also our practice also designed the Sam Wanamaker Theatre, the timber theatre, which we built it at the Globe about 80 years ago or something like that. So we know very well.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, you're so closely intertwined with Bankside. I struggle to put together questions which I thought might stump you. But anyway, moving on. Fact number 2. The Anchor Bankside pub has been serving pints for over 400 years and once counted Samuel Pepys as a customer.
I don't know the answer, but I would like it to be yes, so I'm going to go for yes.
Yes, that's true. So Pepys famously wrote in his diary about watching the Great Fire of London from the pub's terrace in 1696.
Yes, that's it.
And as we know, Anchor Bankside, again, iconic pub.
Yeah.
Fantastic place in the summer, beautiful terrace, best views in London. Also, the scene from Mission Impossible, the first ones, the end of Tom Cruise. I can't remember his co-star. Were just debriefing of the mission that they solved. But anyway, moving on. All right, 2 out of 3, not bad. And finally, Tate Modern's conversion of Bankside Power Station by Herzog and Gneuren was shortlisted for the Stirling Prize in 2000, the very year the award was first given.
I'm going to say yes, because I feel it surely must have been. But I'm a bit worried about all the dates in there and, when the Stirling Prize was invented and things like that. So that's my nervousness about that answer.
Sure. But you're right. It is true. Even I didn't know when the Stirling Prize was set up. But yes, it was 2000. And it also marks, so that means 2025 is the 25th year of Tate Modern. And they had a wonderful series of events. And
did you win it? Did it win it?
No, it didn't. It lost to Peckham Library in that year. So we have Bankside is yet to have a Stirling Prize winner, as it were. And through my research, I've also learned that in 2018, Tate Modern tipped the British Museum as the most visited attraction in the UK.
Interesting.
Yeah. Really fascinating fact. But very good. 3 out of 3, well done. You're a Bankside, and that is pretty, I could predict this. But that means this conversation has come to an end, and I've enjoyed it so much. I wish we could talk on for hours. I was very excited to come to talk to you, like I said, as an urban lover and a big fan of the work that your practice has done. So thank you for being part of Talking Place and Talking Place with me.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
We'll talk soon.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to join the conversation on social media with the hashtag #TalkingPlace. I would also love for you to leave our podcast a review and subscribe to all our podcasts and YouTube channels so you don't miss an episode. There's so much more to explore when it comes to creating good places, and I'm excited to do a deep dive into other topics with you in our next episode. I'm Tanisha Raffiuddin, and it's been my pleasure to be your podcast host. Thank you for listening. See you again next time, where we'll continue Talking Place. Talk soon.